Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Taking the Lead. As you know by now, I'm Ken Jacobs. I'm your host. And this is my opportunity on the Taking the Lead podcast to share with you various leaders, mostly from the world of PR and marketing and communications, who I respect as leaders. So I'm going to share one with you today who I respect a lot, and we're friends. Her name is Melissa Vela-Williams. I always misspell her name in every email. I call her Melissa Vela-Williams. I call her Melissa Vela-Williamson, but she is Melissa Vela-Williams. She is the Chief Communications Architect, love that title, and the founder of MVW Communications. You know where the MVW comes from. Like me, she's a columnist in PRSA strategies and tactics. And she talks about cultural strategy, which to me is just fascinating. She is APR, something I'll never be. She is a certified diversity professional. We're going to talk to her about that a little bit. I'm so jealous. She's a certified therapy dog team member, and she's very topical because unless you've been living under a rock, you've seen the publicity and the social media around her just published book, Smart Talk, PR Essentials All Pros Should Know. So with that, welcome to Taking the Lead, Melissa Vela-Williams.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. And we'll start this with some grace, right, Ken? Like you said, like my last name is a mouthful. In fact, even Spike Lee messed it up when I met him one time. So it's
Right.
Vela-Williamson. And, just to show like all of us have opportunities to go and pass the mic to other pros. So I appreciate this time with you, Ken.
There you go. And she just subtly mentioned how she met Spike Lee. Oh, that was subtle. That's okay, but that's cool. I like that. I'm celebrity obsessed, as most of you know. So let's dig right in. In Smart Talk, you mentioned how important it is for PR professionals to build trust. Why is this especially critical for anyone who wants to be a leader, whether in PR or not?
Right. Well, there can't really be leadership without trust. Real leaders guide through influence. I've been in a lot of positions and opportunities where I was a sole communicator, but that meant I had dotted lines everywhere. So I led through influence. And without that, you can't be seen as an advisor when people won't follow you out of their own want to, right? A lot of employees have to follow leaders, but they'll do that for the short term. For the long haul and in true partnership with employees and those who you want to follow you, that has to be built with trust.
Absolutely. I always say people may come in, they may do the work, they may do it well, but they're not following you. And if they're not following you, that's just transactional, right? That's check it off the to-do list. That's not true followership, which I think is something every leader wants. And you're absolutely right. Trust is the absolute foundation.
Yeah,
So,
we're hearing about quiet quitting, right? And really all that to me is just passive aggressive distrust. That's us saying, I don't like what's happening here. I don't believe what they're telling me. I don't believe in these values that are being pushed on me or whatever that circumstance is. And so I'm crossing my arms and quietly going in another direction. So it's something we need to think about.
And it doesn't have to be that way. That's the thing. Leaders have to understand that if they don't have followership, the first thing you work on is trust, first and foremost.
Absolutely.
So you encourage PR pros in the book to just say the hard thing. So why is it so critical for leaders to say the hard thing? And what are your tips for leaders who want to do so?
Perfect. Well, first of all, I think anyone who does public relations is a leader. I don't know about you, Ken, but for my very first days as a PR coordinator, when I knew like nothing about the profession, I was being called on to make some pretty hard decisions in the moment. So it's our job as PR pros to really offer that ethical, helpful counsel to all types of clients, internal in our organizations or external actual clients. And so when it comes to leadership, employees, in particular, those who follow you, they're your most important stakeholders. And so a lot of times, if we don't have that real talk or say the hard thing type of conversation, that leads to mistakes, it leads to confusion, and really unresolved tension that leads to bigger issues in our relationships and in our work.
Absolutely. I counsel a lot of PR agency leaders, and we talk about giving, they call it critique, constructive critique. And I said, well, don't call it that, call it constructive feedback. But they waver between, I laid it on too thick, too heavy, now the person's disengaged and sad, or I was holding back too much, and they didn't really hear what needs to be fixed. So I encourage them, I say, think of it as a quadrant, the quadrant of communications, especially when giving constructive feedback. You want to be kind, direct, diplomatic, and honest, all at the same time. And if you are, and it takes some work, and if you are able to bring that in your communications, especially around constructive feedback, you're gonna have success, and you no longer have to worry too strong, not strong enough. You're right in that zone. So
yeah, I think that really matters. People want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be understood. And none of that can happen if we're just beating around the bush and not landing our communication plane.
Right, exactly. And we can do it with kindness. And we can do it with diplomacy. I think it all starts at what's the core energy. And if the core energy is, I can help empower them to improve performance, if you're coming from that good place, I think it's easier to deliver in the four quadrants. Let's go back to the book. Your book mentions and supports the 7 principles from the Arthur Page Society, which is the group of leaders, both agency and corporate. I won't list them all here at risk of leaving some out, but all of them are in sync with great leadership, in my opinion. So why do you think, and you started to address this, but why do you think there's such a connection between being a great communicator and being a great leader?
Right. Well, if you can't communicate well, you can't possibly lead well, because we have to start with being able to share a vision, articulate in a way that makes people feel passionate about it, wanting for them to buy in and come along with us on that journey. So leadership doesn't always come in direct reports, as we talked about, Ken. Some of our most influential leaders, they do from a place from being that true guiding example. But as you and I have probably seen, and we see in our headlines almost every day, if you don't have guiding principles first yourself as a person to say, here's what really matters in life, here's what really matters to other humans that I can be in relationship with, and you can't really be a good leader, because leadership starts from within. So I found that these principles, in a very chaotic time where things seem to be changing every day and almost every moment, they felt very grounding and they felt timeless. And so I thought these would be good tips no matter when someone might pick up the book, of saying, this person in this modern day, Melissa, thought that this was very good information, and it was written over 100 years ago. But absolutely, right, we have to say what we mean, and we have to back that up with action, and we have to understand that character starts from within, and organizations are built up of people, and so there's no kind of brand unless it's brought to life by humans. And so all of this really matters, and you don't want to be a great professional who has personal failings that just throw you off your career path and your life path.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting as you're saying that, it reminds me, because there are so many connections, correlations, whatever the right term is, between being a great communicator, being a great PR person, being a great leader. One among many is listening, right? Leaders, to be effective, to truly lead, to have followership, must be great listeners. And the greatest PR and comms people I've ever known are great leaders. I think a lot of people think in our industry it's about the talking, but I know it's not. It's about the listening. So
yeah, the significance in the words you have to share come from the insights you can glean from the conversation.
Absolutely. So you've talked about the importance of mindset, especially a growth mindset. What does a growth mindset mean for you?
Yeah, well, the mindset is really, to me, how we view things in our life or what we believe. And that paradigm will shape everything we do. So I've been reading the first mentors of my whole career have been these self-help books from the beginning of my journey. I didn't know anyone like me who'd worked in PR. I was a first generation college graduate. And so a lot of it was kind of paving my own path. And that's why I'm so passionate about experiences and opportunities to talk with people like you today to kind of share the journey. But having that mindset, a growth mindset, to me meant that, look, I'm not done learning. So if I don't know everything today, that doesn't mean I can't acquire it tomorrow. And in PR, it's dynamic, it's evolving. We can't just say, well, I learned this when I started 20 years ago, and that's how we've always done it, and that's how we'll always do it. You and I were talking offline about the way we should just pitch by phone years ago. I mean, when I started, we would send things through fax. And so even just how we manage the tools of the profession has changed so much. So if we have that growth mindset, that means we accept that we're never done learning and we embrace that challenge throughout our careers.
I think that's all profoundly true. And the one thing I might add is that we are all learning. We've all learned, but we learn more every day. There's more research every day that if you want to grow as a leader, grow in your career, be more effective, whatever you do, it's all about this. And we can rewire our brains, right? I always say you don't have to be a neuroscientist to apply the key factors of neuroscience. Whereas if you find yourself in any way in a negative loop, negative self-talk, fear, any of that, just rewire that, change the monologue in your head, change your mindset. And if you change your mindset, you will change the outcomes. No doubt, no question. And science backs me up on this. And for me, it's actually thrilling. Okay,
Oh,
last question.
I
Oh, go
loved
ahead.
it. Well, I've loved it too, Ken, because neuroscience has really helped me rewire a lot of different self-talk, very limiting self-talk, right?
Yep.
So that's how different of the fixed mindset says, I'm only this good, or because I came from these circumstances, I can only do these things. And so sometimes people put those limitations on us, and then sometimes our own mind puts it on ourselves. So overriding that system and learning how to repath it is great.
Yeah. And it's not as hard as people think. You just observe the thoughts you're having, maybe the feelings, maybe the emotions, and say, is this really serving me? And sometimes it's not. And then you say, well, what thoughts and feelings and emotions would serve me better, just a little bit better? And you begin that path. Okay, last question. You are a certified diversity professional. How can leaders, or anyone for that matter, make sure they're not sharing microaggressions, or as you called it in the book, othering? And maybe you can define what othering means to make sure we're not doing it.
Sure, happy to. Othering is really when we communicate that someone is outside of our in-group, right? That they are different than me, and that feels like it's a negative, there's a negative context around it. So we've all been othered in some situations. I might walk into a room and feel more comfortable because it's a group of women and I'm a woman and we're talking about women things at that moment. That might be the situation. We all have very complex identities made of different parts of ourselves. And in the workplace, we're learning that there's a lot of talk about being your whole self as a leader and your whole self at work. So not everyone's quite ready for that communication wise. And I think for us, I like to intersect DEI principles with PR principles because they align quite naturally, but you have to make a conscious effort to really see that, think about it, and activate it. So my first tip really in this space is to come to it with a very bridge building kind of point of view where it's not polarizing. I'm here to bring different groups of people together, right? And you make that conscious effort to think before you communicate. Like if I could leave you with one tip, just try that. Take that second to stop and think, read the room. Who's in here? What's the sentiment feel like? Is this a sensitive or tricky topic? Have I mapped out what I'm going to say or how I'm going to say it? What happens to my nonverbals when I make this type of comment? Am I using that outdated term? There's a lot of term conversation happening, and I write a PRSA column where I try to unpack that for communicators. but it changes every day. And I have to go to Pew Research Center and look it up myself to see what's most commonly accepted. Because when it comes to people's hearts and culture, like you're not going to make everyone happy, but we want to look for a majority where it's most commonly accepted and appreciated. So a lot of this takes some honest self-reflection and outside feedback and critique. When someone says, you know, that made me feel a certain kind of way, we should really think about it and analyze, how did I communicate? Did I intend to say that? I never thought about that before. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah, and I love you used a great technique where we don't, in any situation, we don't say you did this or you did that. No, I didn't. Because then we're just arguing different takes on the facts. But if we say, when you said this, this is how it made me feel. There's no arguing. This is how it made me feel. Then the other person has to decide, I can't change the past, and am I good with continuing to make people feel this way? And if I'm not good, then I need to do something differently. So just that one bit of language can be so powerful. We could talk forever. We can't. We've come to the end, but I do want to thank you, friend, co-counselor, Co-Counselors Academy member. We could go on and on and on. If people want to buy the book, tell us again its title and where they go.
Sure. It's called Smart Talk Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know. And that's all pros, aspiring pros, working pros. You want to get a take on how things are evolving. It's all in there. It's on Amazon, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with anyone and answer more questions because, like you said, Ken, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot to unpack and talk about, and there's a lot for us to consciously work through as communicators.
You know, you raise a great point, which is any of you watching this, if you haven't linked in with Melissa, you should. You just heard her invitation. If you haven't linked in with me, this is my invitation. So I just want to thank you again, my dear friend, for joining us today. And for everyone else, thank you again for being here. And until next time, keep on taking the lead.